My name is Ivory Bennett, and I'm going to get us started for today. Fostering Media Connections publishes media and journalism to lead the conversation about child welfare, youth justice, and youth homelessness in America. These systems interact with millions of the nation's most vulnerable children and families every year. And research has shown that deep involvement with any of these systems connect to dismal outcomes in adulthood. And yet, they are often ignored by mainstream and local media outlets. Youth Voices Rising is a media training program for youth with lived experience in foster care, juvenile justice systems, and/or homelessness. FMC launched the program in 2016 to help youth gain the skills and confidence they need to articulate the policy and practice changes needed to improve the system, because they are the experts on what solutions might work. Thank you for being here again with us today. My name is Ivory Bennett. I'm the program manager for Youth Voices Rising. I have 17 years of lived experience in foster care and a professional background in both educational leadership and national child welfare advocacy. Today, we're going to explore the connections between foster care and culturally competent practice. So welcome to our second webinar of 2024, Culturally Competent Care, where we're going to embark on a journey of understanding, empathy, and empowerment. Through personal narratives and open dialogue, our diverse panel of individuals with lived child welfare experiences will shed light on the intricacies of culturally competent care and practice. And as we delve into those complexities, we're going to look at identity as well, and how we can help people facilitate better practice in whatever means they're doing the work. Again, thank you for being here, and welcome everyone to this transformative conversation. So, esteemed panelists, I am indebted to you. I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. And if I had $1 million, I would pay you even more than we're going to give you today. Until then, we just got to work with what we got to work with. So can you briefly introduce yourself, briefly, please? So, under a minute or two, can you tell us who you are? Please and thank you. And I'm going to call on someone. How about Brittany? You look like you want to go first.
Good morning, good afternoon to some. My name is Brittany Lee. My pronouns are they, she, and he, and I am a former foster youth with also 17 years lived experience out of Washington State, so the Pacific Northwest, not DC. And I'm also an adoptee, and I've been advocating since I was 17 years old. And I will pass it to, I am currently a kinship care specialist, providing resources to kinship families. But yes, so I'll pass it to Bianca.
Thanks, Britt. Hello, everyone. My name is Bianca Bennett Scott. I go by she, her pronouns. I have 8 years of lived experience in the foster care system, primarily the New York State foster care system, and I am from the Bronx, New York. I'm also an adult adoptee, as well as a child welfare consultant on both local and national levels. And I'm a recent graduate of Cornell University. I just received my MPA, so really excited for that. And I will pass it off to, let's say, Daniel.
Daniel, you're with us? Okay, while we wait for Daniel, Alexis, can you take it away?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Alexis Kramer. I use she, her. I live in the state of Minnesota, born and raised. I have lived expertise of being in the foster care system, and currently, right now, I'm an advocate. Been advocating for those who are experiencing homelessness and trying to transform the child welfare system.
Thank you so much.
And, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, no, feel free. Go ahead, pass it off.
I will pass it to, sorry, I'm bad with names, Ayana.
Perfect. Hi, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Ayana Bridges. I am born and raised in Long Beach, California. I am currently still in California attending UCLA pursuing a bachelor degree. I currently work with a program at our school called the Bruin Resource Center, which serves former foster youth. I specifically work with foster youth on admission, so all things higher education. I have done advocacy within LA County. I have 17 17 years of lived experience in the foster care system with LA County. And my advocacy started in the Long Beach Unified School District and is currently now in the LA School District. And I am happy to be here with everyone. And I will pass it off to our last panelist. I cannot pronounce your name, but I will pass it off to you.
I'm assuming that's me. Hi, thank you so much, Ayana, and congratulations to both you and Bianca as you pursue higher education goals, definitely goals that I'm pursuing currently. I'm Shir Avery, I use they, them pronouns. I'm a national social justice advocate with 6 years experience in the foster care system, also originally from Los Angeles. I was in and out of the foster care system between the ages of 10 and 16 and emancipated directly into homelessness at the age of 17, which is a shared experience among so many foster youth who experience the pipelines of foster care to homelessness, as well as to incarceration. I am the first Black and Indigenous trans person to run for public office in the state of New York, where I've relocated since the age of 18. I'm currently 25 and happy to keep it pushing. And I am really grateful for the opportunity to be here and share space and lift our voices together. Daniel, are you back? Are you here? I'm gonna pass it on to you to give you a chance to say hey.
Yeah, you guys, I'm sorry. My name's Daniel, he, him, his pronouns. I just wanted to, like be on this webinar to give my voice back to the community. I am also, part of the LGBTQ community. I've spent a lot of my life incarcerated as a child and also was taken away, from my mother as a baby. And yeah, hopefully that I could share some valuable insight with you guys and, give back. Give back.
Thank you all for sharing. So everyone who was in child welfare is my cousin, so we're cousins today. So this is more like a family reunion. This is more like a conversation amongst cousins. So let's just keep that cousinly energy as we move forward, all right? And I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but I really share that because we have such connectivity in our lived experiences. And whenever I get the honor of being around people who have lived child welfare experiences, I feel a sense of familiarity in a positive, empowering way. And it just makes me feel good. So I hope y'all can feel good a little bit today too. And we're gonna go ahead and get started with our conversation. So can you share, and some of you touched on this already, but let's elaborate a little bit more for our listeners out there. Can you share your personal experiences of living with families and communities outside of your own culture and language? And how do these experiences shape your understanding of cultural competency? And I want you to think a little bit deeper about this question because it doesn't just persist on one facet of identity. For example, like even though I identify as African-American and I lived in African-American homes and kinship homes and such, it didn't always feel like we had the same cultural backgrounds. And so can any of you share your own experiences with that?
I can start. So I entered foster care at the age of 2 with an older brother who was a year and a half older, in which we were in 10 homes before we landed at the home of a Filipino woman when I was 4 and he was 5. And in that home, and I agree with you on the point of even though when I did live with people who reflected my like skin color or hair textures and stuff, like they were Black or under the Black diaspora, it didn't always feel like I was with kinfolk, if that makes sense. But I lived 12 years with a Filipino foster mom, and her husband was white, but the Filipino culture was definitely dominant in the household. But because of that and like the colonized kind of mindsets that unfortunately were generationally ingrained, there was a lot of anti-Blackness in that home. And from middle school to high school, so for about 6 or 7 years, give or take, I was made to straighten my hair because they couldn't bother to learn how to either teach me, bring me to someone who knew how to take care of my hair or do it themselves, like learn how to do it themselves, nor were they mandated to by state, like, implementations. There was no policies requiring them to learn how to do that. So by the time I was an adult, my hair was really fried, dead. It just really, it was cooked. So I had to learn from scratch how to like take care of my hair. And that did bring up a lot of identity issues for me throughout grade school, feeling kind of excluded from the girlies that did have more natural hairstyles over like my straightened fried hair. And then just feeling a lot of anxieties around when it rained or swimming, which was required at my high school. Learning how to swim was like the most stressful quarter of my life. Feeling really embarrassed about how my hair looked when it got wet and whatnot. So I think overall, growing up, reflecting back on that, what I learned was like how important it is, regardless of the dominant culture in the home, that foster parents, especially stranger care, are required to like learn how to do that and take that step up to care for Black and Brown youth's physical selves, but beyond that, like their cultural selves as well, their spiritual selves. Right. So that's like one main takeaway I would add. And I do have more thoughts, but I'll let someone else share.
Brittany, thank you for sharing. And you deserve reparations. Like that is, as a woman who identifies as Black, hair is such a big part of our identity and our experiences in the world. And we are so judged before we even get to speak a word. And so to have something like that manipulated so poorly and treated without the sacredness that it really is I feel for you. And even as an adult, I struggle because I didn't get my hair taken care of as a child either. Would anyone like to share their experiences? That was excellent. Thank you so much.
I could go next if no one wants to go. So, well, I grew up in Harlem, New York. I'm a New Yorker through and through. And as a Black woman, it was really hard for me during my first placement because I was placed with a Hispanic family, predominantly Puerto Rican. And because at such a young age, I was placed in this home, I really didn't understand who I was and my identity as a Black woman. So being in these spaces, although there were a lot of pros, I understand the value of culturally understanding inclusivity and understanding the perspectives of Hispanic cultures. In essence, it hurt me in my understanding of who I was because I grew up with this anti-Blackness gaze. Like I felt as though I was Latina, and now I know because I've been more informed and I understand I'm Afro-Latina, but I've always resonated with more the Latina side of me. And now that I understand growing up that my culture and my background with my biological family, it's really helped me understand who I am as a Black woman and that intersection between the experiences that both Black and Brown people go through and how that relates to me. So growing up, it was really difficult for me to be in spaces, especially living in the Bronx, New York, where it's predominantly Latinx communities. I always associated myself with being like from Spanish culture, and I never really fit in because I didn't know how to speak Spanish. But I understood what community looked like, but I didn't feel a part of it. And it wasn't until I was about 14 or 15 when I had a Black social worker and I was reunited with my kinship family where I was like, oh, I'm Caribbean, I'm African American, and like Brittany said, the different diasporas of Black culture, and that really empowered me in a sense. So yet, although I got a lot of understanding and being a part of that next communities, it did take away a little bit from me from understanding my identity as a Black woman. So now I'm trying to relearn these things in this new time and culture. So it's very interesting. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Bianca. And I'm in the Caribbeans right now, y'all. I'm actually here because their Department of Human Services for the United States Virgin Islands brought me down to do this kind of advocacy work that we're doing right here, right now, working with lived experts. And I only share that because a few weeks ago, I found out that I actually have Puerto Rican ancestry, Bianca. So when you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, connection there. But in saying that, the ancestry test, DNA testing, that can be really important in helping to positively develop the identity of people experiencing the child welfare system, especially for those who are incredibly disenfranchised from their families, their biological families. They might not know their background. DNA testing, while controversial, I understand there's, two sides to a story, can definitely be helpful too in a positive way in terms of connecting people back to their cultures and to potential relatives as well. I am going to hop to someone else. Would anyone like to share their insight on this, on living with families within the child welfare system who have different cultural experiences or linguistic experiences?
I think I want to just jump in and like note that a connection that I'm making in both Brittany and Bianca's testimonies are that the deep effects of colonization, right? I think like I just want to name that for what it is, that this is very specific and institutionalized and systemic, and has also really deeply affected me as well. I think just to start, that impact began before I even entered the foster care system. Both sides of my family heavily assimilated into American culture. I am Blackfoot and Seminole descent, and Seminole on my mom's side, Blackfoot on my father's side. My paternal grandmother was last on our reservation in Wyoming, and my great grandmother was last on our reservation in Oklahoma. And I grew up in the home not ever discussing indigeneity or blackness, mind you. And when I got into the foster care system, that was only that much more deeply entrenched. And I bring up assimilation because there's something called the Indian Child Welfare Act. And had my family not assimilated so heavily into American culture, I, as a Black and Indigenous young person, as well as my siblings, could have benefited from the Indian Child Welfare Act. Had we could have had more protections and a greater sense of community support, had we not lost connection to our roots. To take a step further to discuss like my lived experience within the foster care system, I was in and out of several foster homes, but most of my experience is actually within group home settings. And to point to the lack of LGBTQ competency at large, but also specifically within group home settings, it is, at least in my experience, was next to non-existent. Add that onto living in basically a compound pre-jail setting, with almost 100 other young people of varying identities who either don't know where they've who they are, what their lineages are, or like how to seek support for how they identify. I think just speaks volumes to come full circle to like how integrated the systemic and institutionalized barriers are to like actually feeling supported as a young person. I think it's really designed this way, and I don't think we as young people should have to wait till we're like our quarter lives to find, who we are, or even as you said, Ivory, to be able to like take a DNA test and seek like that support. So it's very ingrained and it's all a part of the system. And I'm happy to like join forces with other young people who, like the panelists on this call, are trying to figure out how we break those cycles.
Thank you so much. I love hearing you speak. Anyone else want to share, or do y'all want to jump on to the next question? It's up to you.
I'll share. Um, for me personally, it was hard, because I am mixed, so like trying to find where I belong, quote unquote, in a lot of my poetry and my music, I say like I'm too white to be brown and too brown to be white. So, kind of finding where I fit in was always a struggle. And then also adding that added layer of like being a part of the LGBTQ community. And even the hair part, right? Like my hair is a little bit unmanageable at times because I'm mixed. So one part of it's like white, the other part is brown and frizzy and poofy, and nobody really taught me how to like manage it or take care of it, or even in my culture, because I'm Paiute Indian, is like hair is sacred. Nobody told me that. I've always had this connection with like my hair, and when I was young, I would grow it out and I had it like, pretty long. And I remember kids used to like make fun of me, and ever since then I kind of just shaved it, and I never really realized like the sacred power that like especially my culture, like puts on hair, and how, masculinity and things of that nature is also identified through our hair. And now like as I'm older, I'm wishing that I could take back those years and like get my hair, but I can't even grow my hair now. But the point of that is like a lot of times, like I feel like we're disconnected, from those things. It took me many years to even figure out that I had tribal affiliation, and, also just like acknowledging my whiteness, but also like my brownness, and like being accepting of both of those. I feel like in this era, a lot of people are reverse racism, where we think it's okay to oppress white people just because like their generations before oppressed us. And I had to come to terms with that, especially within my own self, looking in the mirror, and then also recognizing the privileges and also the oppression that exists in my own world, right? Like I go to Puerto Rico, and I'm praised for my whiteness, but in LA it's like they look at me and I'm not white enough, and I always had to like really come to terms with that, because I remember as a young boy I would always try and fit in. That was the main thing. I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be heard, and I wanted to be a part of a community. And so that's where like I had to figure out, oh dang, I'm too brown to be white. I would try and hang out, with the white community and make friends, and I just didn't understand them because my roots, were Hispanic or Latino. I just looked this color, and then going over there, I didn't speak enough Spanish. I didn't, look brown enough. My hair was a little too fine or whatever it was. So for me, I think, it's tough because a lot of people in our generations, we are mixed, mixed descent. We have, multiple different, cultures in us, and it's hard for us to really figure out where we fit in. And that's kind of like where I'm trying to be a trailblazer, and remind us that we could create that community. We could create, the next generation of what it looks like to be us, because we're unique. We're all unique. A lot of us are mixed, and it's hard for us to be any one thing because we're not. But the point is, like, sometimes like taking that power back, and learning more about our past also gives us an opportunity to create a better future. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm learning a lot of my traditions, my native traditions, the healing herbal medicine, all of these things. I'm in the process of like taking that power back, but also like healing, and accepting me for all parts of myself, not being, racist towards me even, and towards the blood that I have within me, because I am white, I am Mexican, I am native, and to own all things is important, not just one piece of it because the other piece, may be oppressive or anything like that. I think it's important to remind us that, those are generations ago. Now we are the generation to pave the path to be able to not see things in that way, to not be like, oh, I don't like me because I'm too light, or I'm too brown, or I'm too this or that. Like right now, everybody's pretty much mixed, and then kind of coming to terms with that, because it's hard to like really tap into the culture when you're not any one culture.
Thank you so much for sharing, Daniel. So I'm hearing we need to have a panel on hair. And I only bring that up because there are so many aspects of being human that foster children or people who experience the juvenile justice system, or those who are experiencing homelessness, don't get to have or receive. How many of us had to figure out how to take care of our hair? Like no one ever taught us that. No one ever taught us basic hygiene skills. A lot of us didn't brush our teeth every day or every night before we went to bed because no one was there to tell us how to do that. We didn't. Kids are learning how to be humans. They're not born knowing how to do these things. And if they are, adultification is probably at play. And that's another issue that we need to address. But it may sound trivial to some people through certain lenses, but hair is such an important part of identity, and it can be such an important part of trajectory in terms of success or failure to thrive, or all of those different things. So thank you all so much for sharing. And I feel like we just not gonna have enough time for this conversation. Like maybe we need a part 2 and a part 3 to follow up. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next question though. So, and feel free to answer as much or as little as you'd like, but what are some of the best practices you've encountered or recommend for creating safe and inclusive spaces for individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds? Feel free to jump in, whoever has anything to share.
I can start off, guess kind of piggybacking off what Daniel was saying, like we want to create spaces and best practices around spaces that honor intersectionality. We have to understand, like Daniel was saying, individuals may belong to multiple cultural groups in it simultaneously. And it's important to understand their experiences and understand that they're shaped due to these different identities. Um, a lot of times I see spaces where, oh, well, people and ideas where people think, oh, well, if we just get a group of people together who have similar backgrounds, things will happen, solutions will happen. And yes, that's true, but we have to be really intentional about how we create these spaces because it's important to understand that even the people in these spaces are still trying to understand the nuances behind intersectionality, such as power, perspective, innate biases. So it's really important in creating these spaces to honor intersectionality. And I say that just because right now in like child welfare and just in general, in trying to incorporate lived experience into spaces, like I see everything so catered to one demographic. And it's like those spaces, like yes, those spaces are very important for our communities, but those are usually led by us. If we're gonna come into a space and create spaces, like it has to be with people interconnected with people with lived experience, but it also has to understand that there are different identities and people are still understanding who they are and what they connect with and who they identify as their community. So we really have to honor that when we create these spaces and be purposeful and intentional in that.
Thank you, Bianca, too. And I just want to uplift too. You reminded me, there are a lot of people who don't get to be in these webinars, who don't get to have these conversations with people who are doing the work, who are creating the policies and the legislations. And so I want to uplift and highlight that for our audience to know that we are just a few voices of many, and we are not representative of everyone who is having these experiences within the child welfare system. And that's why it's so important to engage with people of all backgrounds who experience the child welfare system in any regard, because we're just one small piece of a bigger puzzle. And there are different perspectives to be shared and to be heard and to be incorporated in this work. So thank you for addressing that. Does anyone else want to share some best practices or recommendations for creating safe and inclusive spaces?
Yeah, I would just say like, providing opportunities for people to learn more about where they come from. I think that's important for me. A lot of the stuff that I'm connected to is like the spiritual aspect. So like learning to be a medicine man, practicing Reiki, a lot of this stuff like I'm starting to incorporate in my life now. But I think that's hard, like I saw the question in the chat talking about like the children not being able to identify with their race and feeling bad for who they are. And sometimes it's just really hard to like answer that question. I think, we have to allow people the space to go through those feelings and to like kind of learn on their own, right? Like it's trial and error, and there isn't a fix it all approach. I feel like it's just about allowing people to be authentically themselves and to, learn about their culture, about their heritage, who they are, and sad to say, I feel like, right now, a lot of white people, they have the butt end of the stick. Like people like from our culture, our communities, like I feel like we're very oppressive towards that community now. And that's something that I had to like rethink too, because I had to like look in the mirror and be like, well, I'm also mixed with white. And also, why am I going to do the thing to the people that did the thing to me that made me feel bad? Why would I reverse it? Why don't we just create a world where we could all be authentically ourselves and not oppress each other because of how we look? And that's basically my answer to that, is like you have to maybe let them go through it, but also provide them enough like knowledge and strength to be able to like understand that they're beautiful in their own right, that they don't have to change who they are to fit in. And like there's always going to be that oppressiveness, sadly. It's the yin and yang is what I call it, of the world, the good and the bad, right? But like how do we navigate it, set boundaries, understand your self-worth, provide opportunities for people to learn how to love themselves is super important. But self-exploration and like tapping into your roots, maybe if you're from Iceland, go to Iceland, or whatever it is, right? Like, I feel like it's important for us to learn our history and really like be able to tap into that, but also not allow others' opinions of us like dictate who we are or how we think of ourselves. Because it's always going to be somebody hating on us. Like, sad to say, but it's true, just because of how we look.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone else want to contribute to this question, or should we move on to the next?
Yeah, I can go. This is Alexis. I'm just sitting here thinking. Um, this question is a great question, but it's also hard because when it comes to certain spaces, and especially with a lot of spaces that I've been in the room, it involves a lot of community building, being able to, find your voice and have a voice in certain settings. But then it's also hard because you don't want to, what am I trying to say? You don't want to offend somebody else, because I'm personally, what I've been seeing in my state, the state of Minnesota, is they primarily attack Black and brown families. Everything. Our Black men are getting shot every day by police. No, I wouldn't say not every day, but it's usually in the news. Every minute you turn on the news, a Black man's getting shot, or they take our children from Black women. And it, to me, I guess, like, when it comes to those sort of settings, it's like, how do we repair the damage that the child welfare has caused families? How do we repair the trauma that people have endured already? I grew up in foster care and I still can't get away from CPS. They still in my life. They've been in my life since day one, and I just want them to stop. But I think personally, with like spaces, I think it's just a matter of trying to find community people that can relate to the certain type of space, depending on what it is, whether it's a healing space for like a certain group of people, or if, for example, or if it could just be for everyone. Because I love everyone regardless. But like, for me personally, it's just like, how do we repair the damage that the system has done to Black and brown families too? Like, we can't ignore that. And I'm sorry to bring up race in this, in the scenario, but race does play a part in our whole United States. I don't know if all the other states are the same, where they just, attack the Black and brown families, but the community needs to figure out how to heal. And I guess the only way for us to heal is if we let it out in a certain space where we can relate to each other. And I just want to be in that setting where I can be able to be myself, speak how I feel without offending another person, because of how I see, how the world is compared to, somebody else seeing it. So that's just that's my personal thing, and I'll just stop right there.
Thank you, Alexis. And then Brittany, I'm going to let you speak because I've seen you try to unmute and hop in the conversation like double dutch, but you're waiting your turn. But I want to uplift this for our audience, is that two things. Don't ever be sorry about speaking about race, because racists aren't sorry about the oppression that they walk out into the world and perpetuate every single day. And as the person who runs Youth Voices Rising here at Fostering Media Connections, we're going to talk about it. We're going to highlight it. We're going to educate people on it every single time. Okay. And I'm still here, so they're letting me do it. But the other thing that I want to uplift about it is, and this is going to be uncomfortable and it might make other people uncomfortable. White people need to heal. It can't just be Black and brown people healing. White people also need to heal, and they also need to be accountable for the harm that they perpetuated, whether that have been intentional or unintentional. They need to talk about it. They need to acknowledge it. They need to see how it shows up in the way that they're living their lives every single day. And I'm not judging them as human beings, right? Because they were born into the oppressive systems just like we were born into the oppressive systems. But they need to be accountable and how it has impacted their lives. They need to be accountable for the privilege that it affords. And they need to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to grow and heal and change. And on that note, I'm going to pass it back over to you, Brittany.
Thank you. So I was just gonna add that as far as like a practice that's helped me be more inclusive, and just kind of like something I've called out in spaces where it might be like a lot of teachers or practitioners that are looking to learn um, more about how to be, yeah, more inclusive and safe. So my like strongest belief is that for a young person or really anybody to be truly safe, which is like that word's thrown around a lot, but there aren't a lot of truly safe spaces. So in my opinion, for someone to be truly safe, like in a room full of 1,000 people, the most vulnerable person in that space needs to be safe. So the Black and brown or Native, the visibly and invisibly disabled, the LGBTQI two-spirit youth, the youth assigned female at birth, the youth that are, yeah, all the different, the most intersectionally disadvantaged youth needs to be safe for the most privileged youth to even be safe. And you may have the illusion of safety as the most privileged person in a room, but if the most vulnerable person isn't safe, you're not safe. No one is. It's kind of like that mindset of like, you know, no one's free until we are all free. And I think it also we need to acknowledge more that I keep hearing this phrase thrown around: the system's broken, child welfare system is broken. It's not broken. It's working exactly as designed. So I would always encourage people to stay open and imaginative and brave, enough to continue to like imagine a world where most of our jobs aren't even needed. Most of our advocacy isn't needed because there are so much supports channeled and highly desperately back to communities so that they gain back their own sovereignty, so that they gain back their own agency and power, and stop assuming like this with this paternalistic idea that we need to teach people how to do it. They knew how to do it long before any of us showed up here, long before this space was occupied. A lot of these lands were occupied. They were already doing it exactly how they needed to do it. They were alive for a reason, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't have been humans in that area. They were surviving. They were thriving, in fact. So I think just acknowledging that the system's not broken, it's working exactly as designed, starting from forcibly separating Black and brown families who cross transnational and imaginative borders, separating all the children from people who were brought over from the transatlantic slave trade, starting from the 1500s, right? For like 2,000 years of transatlantic slave trades, then forcibly separating those children from their parents. That's the early practices of child welfare, right? And then the boarding schools that Native Americans were forced to be put in, you know, and then, you know, internment camps that we had on our soil not that long ago. All those practices are rooted, it's what the child welfare system is rooted in. The practice of slave catching, bringing back slaves who are escaping from their plantations or from their owners and masters, that is turned into what is now the police. Like, and then the police brown, Black and brown communities at much higher volumes. And so like, that's why I'm saying it's not broken, it's working exactly as designed. So just acknowledging that at its core is a huge stepping stone for acknowledging where to go from here. But yeah.
Brittany, okay, there's something in the water because y'all are just too good today. I'm almost forgetting that I'm supposed to be working right now. Like, the conversation is hot and heavy and it is exactly what needs to be shared today. And I'm just, again, so grateful for y'all showing up and sharing your authentic truth. So grateful for you sharing your authentic truth. I'm almost like lost for words. And I don't want to keep the party from going, but we are running out of time, y'all. So I don't even think we're going to get through all of our questions today. But we're going to try our best. And maybe we're going to have a part two. Maybe y'all want to write about this stuff. We could talk about that offline. But let's go ahead and jump to our next question. So, geez, do y'all have any examples of a positive or culturally affirming space that you experienced while you were in care? And can you share what that looked like or what it could have even been like if it had existed? So maybe it didn't exist, but it's something that could have easily been created and perpetuated. And I remembered my thing. Thank you so much, the universe. So let's bring it down to a granular level. And what can you all who are listening today do in your everyday lives when you wake up with the power that you willed? Are you a safe person? So forget about facilitating safe spaces. Are you a safe person? Think about it. Are you a safe person? Do people feel safe around you? Are your words intentional? Are your intentions to always grow? Is your ego checked enough to be able to do this work in a way where you can learn alongside the people who you're serving and working for and with? I think that is a really important question to ask yourself along this work. And if you're not in therapy, please get into it. It really, really helps this whole conversation. And thank you, Cher, for putting your information in the chat. For those of you, the panelists today, if you want to put your information in the chat where people can get with you one-on-one and talk more about this conversation, please feel free to do so. And then I'm going to hop into our next question. Okay, y'all. Oh, I love talking to y'all. See, cousins? See, cousins? This is what I mean. So let's talk about it. Did you experience any cultural affirmations, any community spaces or groups or activities that really helped you to feel inclusive and respected? Or if not, what could that have looked like in the groups and in the places and in the experiences that you had?
I can go. It's funny that you brought up therapy because that's one thing that I could not get when I was in foster care. So I actually was with family members when I was in foster care. My aunt and uncle were predominantly white, I should say. My aunt was full Vietnamese, and my uncle was white. And so my whole setting was basically I grew up in a family who was not my race. And I knew nothing about my Black culture. I'm almost 30 now. And growing up, I didn't really have an education. And when I was with my aunt and uncle, I just felt like I couldn't talk to my aunt because she was either yelling at me all the time because I couldn't do anything right in her eyes. But she did not know that I had a learning disability, different ability, I should say. She didn't know how to work with a child that had a different ability. And I didn't fully understand that until as I got older, when I started doing this advocacy work. I have learned to try to educate myself as much as I can, but it just goes out the ear. Everything I learned just literally, it goes in one ear and then it goes out. And I have to be reminded like 2,400 times a day in order for me to keep it in my brain, because I was never taught growing up how to do anything. It kind of plays into, I didn't know how to do my hair. I never thought I was beautiful. I hated myself. And to this day, I still kind of do, but I'm working on those momentums on trying to get myself out of that, that fight or flight mode to where I'm always trying to survive, trying to eliminate all those negativity into my mind saying, oh, you're stupid or you're not good enough or you're never, stuff like that. I was never told I was beautiful. I was never told that I was lovable or important or anything like that in my family. So in that particular setting in foster care, I would have liked if they would allow me to voice my concerns, let me be myself, let the healing out, be able to speak my mind. And maybe therapy would have helped me a lot better than it has now. Because I'm a mess. I'm gonna be honest. I'm literally about to cry right now because it's been a lot and I'm going through a lot, and I just appreciate being in this space because it really, the more I talk about it, the less emotional I will be. But I just been going through so much and I just appreciate the space. So thank you so much for having me.
Alexis, we're here for you. And I don't want this to sound frivolous, but there's so much love in this room and this space for you. And within the greater Youth Voices Rising community, we are here. If y'all ever want to have time with me, you can hit me up. We can get on Zoom. We can get on FaceTime. When I say that we're cousins, we're really cousins. And I care about y'all in a way that family should have cared about us when we were in child welfare. And so that's what I've been dedicating my life to, whether or not I realized it. But we're a community of people who have shared experiences and shared love. And we're not perfect, and we're all growing and changing, and we're all going through things, but we understand more than you might realize, and we hold space and we feel for you more than you might realize. So just, if you're open to it, let us be here and let us be a part of you and let us walk alongside your journey. I do appreciate that. And this conversation is so juicy, and I'm looking at the time, like there's no way that 48 minutes has gone by. Like, are you serious right now? And we're not even halfway through our questions, y'all. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to stop with the questions right now. I want to ask all of our webinar panelists if they have one more thing that they'd like to share with our audience. And then I'm going to jump into questions because I do see that we have several questions from our attendees. So if you can share one more nugget with our audience as to how they can create safe, culturally competent spaces and practices, please do that. And then we're going to open the floor to the questions. So whoever would like to go first, please feel free.
I'd like to comment. I know I haven't spoken this whole time. Sorry, I've just been kind of listening. That's kind of where I fall. But I do want to say, I think, at least with the work I've been doing, I think it's very important to allow youth that are impacted, young adults, older adults that are impacted, to really just go through their experience as it comes. It's very difficult. I think when I hear a lot of stories that are, I spend a lot of time, in the foster system, but there's people who have stories that are way, like, I pale in comparison to anything they've ever been through. And I think it's very patronizing to have someone come and say, oh, I get it. And it's like, you don't. None of us truly understand one another's experiences. It's very important to listen. And it's something I do a lot in the UCLA space. There's youth that are impacted where maybe they're triggered by something and people at work are like, I'm never going to work with them again. They'll lose jobs. They'll be removed. And it's the incompetency of not wanting to listen. It's immediately trying to draw a conclusion instead of just saying, hey, like, what if I do just spend a day or an hour, 5 minutes, even asking them, do you want me to listen? Do you want my advice? Or am I just an ear for you to have to vent out to? I think it's very important for people to recognize their positionality and how important that is. It is very, 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 very tough for people that are system impacted or for populations that are underserved, be it culturally, be it race, whatever it is. It's very, very difficult because they don't get to talk. And when you don't allow them to do so, it does not help them at all. So I think creating spaces of which not necessarily, like, for some people that is therapy, and that's fine. For other people, it's support groups. For other people, it's a resource center, a wellness center, allowing people to have that space, because it's hard enough for us to go through these things and then have to create the space for these things. It's very, just very difficult. So I think that's one thing I would like to leave with the audience is being keen to listening and asking if someone wants you to listen.
I'm gonna piggyback off that. Oh, sorry, Daniel.
No, you go ahead, girl. I'll go after you.
Sounds good. The tidbit I just want to leave is, in general, when working with young people, whether they're still in the system or aged out like us, but address your internalized ageism. I think that's one of those isms that's kind of gets brushed under the rug, and it does go both ways. It goes all the ways. But of course, like your other isms and your phobias, your racism, your homophobia, like these are things, even if we're queer, even if we're Black, even if we're differently abled, we all have to unlearn all the things. So address your fears, like, and heavily try to shift them to love for the sake of young people and yourself as well. And then also just acknowledging that it's no one else's job to do the work for you, especially someone literally, socially, and financially less advantaged than you. So for that reason, like, doing the work on your own can feel lonely sometimes. It's going to be radical and brave, but it's going to be hard. So actively seek out people in spaces like this where we're in this space to, you know, share our stories, to educate and stuff. And don't make sure you're not asking people who, you know, basically, you know, quote unquote, aren't on the clock and aren't asking to be your teachers, especially if you're not willing to compensate them in some shape or form. So just seek us out and listen to us, and, you know, who want to share, while being mindful not to burden your unlearning journey on those, like I said, who aren't willing to be teachers. I'd also encourage you to read banned books and push against the grain and be vulnerable with young people as much as appropriate and safe. As a young person and all my peers, as far as I'm aware, we can sniff out authenticity, especially Gen Z and Gen A already, like they can sniff out inauthenticity. So just be real, be vulnerable, be honest about where you're at, meet them at their level, and they may most likely be willing to meet you at yours too. So yeah, thank you for coming, everyone, today.
Thank you, Brittany. Bianca or Alexis, do y'all want to uplift anything?
I'll just highlight two big things. The first one I think is like cultural competency right now is this, I want to say this trending topic right now. Everybody wants to be culturally competent. However, again, just remember that it's a journey, not a destination. And in being culturally competent, you also have to be have some humility and some adaptability and understanding that you will never fully grasp every nuance of another culture, especially if you come from some place of privilege. So it's always being open to continuous learning and self-reflection. And that's how we eliminate, you know, these terrible archetypes like this savior complex that we see a lot of people coming into this space in child welfare wanting to save a young child, especially a young child from a vulnerable community. But that's not your place. Like it's about learning and understanding and growing and working with a young person and helping them. And I guess the last thing I would add to is stop expecting youth to always give themselves and you not give something as well. I think Brittany like said it best, be vulnerable. A lot of times in these spaces, our young people, like we're always expected to give a piece of ourselves and then leave. If you want to be authentic with a young child and a young person, you have to be able to give and take and give something to that young person as well, because it gets exhausting sometimes, you know, always, especially not even just a young person in care, but in my experience as a Black woman, always having to share your experience, always having to give and feeling like nothing's given in return. So yeah, that's just my sentiments.
Y'all are killing it. Like when I forget I'm working, I'm serious, y'all. I'm just getting caught up in the conversation. Like it's just too much, and it's so good. Daniel, did you want to leave anything with the audience before we jump into these questions?
Yeah, I would just say longevity, you know, so like you know, the previous person was saying, like, a lot of people want us to come and give our lived experience and our voices, but then just leave. So like creating more long-term opportunities for us to be able to like build, you know, and then also pay us because we need money too. So like, you know, our time and expertise is valuable. It's invaluable, I would say, actually. And a lot of the people that show up to even meetings like this, or, you know, a lot of the other meetings, like they're getting paid hefty sums of money, like $60 an hour, right? And we're over here getting gift cards. So I think it's important to, you know, remind yourselves that if you want lived experience voices in young adults and people from, you know, system impacted backgrounds, like make sure that you pay us adequately, excuse me. And yeah, that would be that.
Just for the record, we're not giving you gift cards. We're going to give y'all checks.
No,
So
not you.
I
I'm
just
saying, but
want to
multiple
highlight
times.
that
Yeah,
for the
multiple times.
audience.
Hey, I
We're
like the
giving
gift
y'all.
cards sometimes, but every time it's like, oh my God. But see, you don't have to
I
write
get
those
it.
off on your taxes,
I
so
get
that's
it.
also a good thing.
That every
Yeah,
once in a while, that DoorDash gift card.
yeah, exactly. How about a DoorDash gift card and a little check?
Okay,
We
y'all asking
deserve
for
it
a lot
all,
right
okay?
now, but we're gonna get offline. Okay, cousins. Look, we're gonna take it to the cousin group chat because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But let's try to get some of these questions addressed. And this is just such a juicy, meaningful conversation. I really urge all of you, if you want to write for us on some of these topics, please get with me. As soon as you submit it, we'll get you paid for writing because that's what we like to do here. YBR, we like to pay people for the lived expertise and contributions to our media company. So if that is something that you'd like to do, please do get in touch with me. So I pulled some of the questions that I found in the chat. So one of them is, what options do you think would help to have background culturally and ethnicity for hair care, community, etc. for children. Groups for the children, would that help? Would educating the foster homes help and giving them help with the community resources be a good idea? Are these conversations that we should be having with our older youth? Anyone want to address that really quickly?
Who's better at it? I don't. I have a little piece to say. I think like social media is a good tool to use. Like a lot of people like kind of stray away from it, but there's a lot of good information. So maybe like like doing your research, like exposing the youth to like TikTok videos of people that are doing their hair naturally, whatever it is, like, for blacks, like Mexicans, natives, like we all have different traditions and ways to do things. So like learning that and then also giving them tools to do it. Like, one like community might need Gorilla Glue, the other community might need Mocos de Gorilla, it just depends on like how you style it, what you want. But I think like exposing people to their culture and also like using social media, especially for this younger generation, would be a good tool. And like I go on TikTok a lot and get a lot of good information. And then obviously I do the research and make sure it's accurate. But like kind of using the tools that you already have, I don't think it's hard for us to tap into that stuff. It's just, hard to take that step, like yeah, that's it. That's all.
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to uplift having more than one person from a culture interact with your youth. So not just one Black person, maybe try to find like 3 to 5 in the community who they can look to and learn from, because there's nuance and cultural nuance in different groups and subgroups of people, places, and identities. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and try to address another question. So we have a single foster dad of teen boys. 2 of his kids express a lot of internalized hatred towards their race. They wish that they were things other than what they are. So what advice do you have for helping him to affirm their identity and backgrounds when they are struggling with hatred for it?
For me, it was really important for me to understand my history, and understanding how I connected with my ancestors and the people before me. In my experience as a foster youth, I have been resilient, and it was important for me to tap into that resiliency. I needed to understand people like Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman who ran for president. I needed to understand the women of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta. Like I needed to understand how impactful that was for their journey and what that connection was for me. So I had to hear those tough stories. It wasn't until I heard the first story of Emmett Till in class where I was like, wait, that connection just hits in a different way. So sometimes those conversations are going to be hard, but you really have to tap into that history, because once you do and they see the connections within, because again, history repeats itself always. Once you see those connections tap in, and they resonate with those, and they finally have, they finally have those diverse representations, they can tap in and say, I connect with this person, I see where they come from, and that's where the connection begins, and they can stop, they can help address that internal hatred that they might be addressing. So wishing you luck.
Thank you, Bianca. And I'm going to reiterate, therapy, please. I know therapy, traditional therapy doesn't necessarily work for everyone. There's multiple modalities that you can use, and different community groups too, that can really help with affirming identity and developing a positive relationship with that. We have one more person. Is it Gayleen Abbott Faye who raised their hand? I'm going to see if we can engage that person or if there are any other questions. Okay, Gayleen, if you can unmute yourself or type in the chat your question. But in the meantime, Marty Land is asking, can we get some advice for ways to help those with Native American cultural genetics? And anyone want to jump in on that?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm native myself, and I think for me, the best way for me to like, and I'm just learning this, I'm 28 now, is like being exposed to that piece of my culture. I went on a men's retreat. I've been, doing like, healing spaces and learning more about my spirituality. I'm in the process of like learning how to be a medicine man. Um, and all of these are like kind of intertwined with my culture. Obviously it's not necessarily that route because I'm more on the spiritual, like I want to heal and give back to my community. But I feel like just being exposed to that, even sweat lodges, like, learning more about hair and just about our culture. But yeah, just being more exposed to things like that, I think would be important because in a nutshell, like our communities, especially Native communities, we're very in touch with like nature, with, you know, those kind of traditions. So that's kind of embedded in our culture, is that spirituality aspect of it. And like learning about ancestors and like praying to the ancestors and doing things of that nature, I think is important, at least for me and my perspective. And then also like maybe even going to the land where you're from. On the men's retreat, I went to this land, and it was actually my tribal land. I didn't even know. And I just felt very connected, you know, being in the hot springs. Like I felt like my grandma was right there with me. But I don't think it's a one size fits all approach. You know, it's just about maybe what the youth is open to, and then giving them the opportunity to do that, you know? Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Brittany, I saw that you unmuted. Do you want to share?
Oh, I was just asking exactly like help them how, but or like I guess more like a specific like I'm trying to figure out what exactly they were wanting help with around it, because that was broad, but Daniel answered it pretty well.
Okay, thank you for that. I gotta take a deep breath because just wow, like y'all are so awesome and your lived expertise is invaluable. There's not enough that I could pay you for being here for today. And I can't put an amount on the things that you've endured just to be here. I really, really do appreciate you. And if there's anything I can do to help you on your journey, please feel free to reach out to me and I will try my best to assist you. And to our attendees and our audience, thank you so much for the willingness to attend today and for listening. If you want to further the conversation, please feel free to reach out to our webinar panelists individually, and or you can reach out to me and I can get you in contact with them. So I thank you so much for being here today, every single one of you. I will be in touch about compensating you for your lived expertise today. And to everyone else, please stay tuned to Youth Voices Rising and Fostering Media Connections to learn more and to engage with the work of bettering the child welfare system. Thank you all so much, and you have a wonderful, beautiful day. And even if you can't, don't mess anyone else's up, okay? On that note, bye y'all.